So I would like to introduce our speaker, who happens to be Rich Hopkins. Our next speaker happens to be Rich Hopkins, who believes storytelling is a key to great public speaking. Tonight he will share one of his favorite authors with us, one who had perhaps the biggest impact on his style of both writing and speaking. With its speech, Dandelion, welcome Rich Hopkins. Rich?
How many of you have heard of Ray Bradbury? One, two, anybody else? Chris, have you heard of Ray Bradbury?
Yes.
Excellent. Come on in. We're just getting started. Ray Bradbury was an author from mostly the 40s, 50s, and 60s, although he's certainly done plenty of contemporary work in the last 30 years. He's often most known for books like Fahrenheit 451, which was a dystopian... I wanted to use the word dystopian, and then I wasn't sure where to go with that. I saw Hunger Games last night, and it was about this alternate future where you have this kingdom, and it's in control of the rest of the world. In Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury's themes were very similar in terms of having a government control and a putting other groups under submission and destroying books. How many of you read Fahrenheit 451 at some point in school? Chris did. I know I did. It's certainly a book that is against books. It talks about a society that burns books, and it's all about creating an idea that you should totally rely on the government and that life is about entertainment and that you should not think for yourself. Ray Bradbury wrote that. He wrote The Martian Chronicles, which is clearly science fiction about a society on the planet Mars. He wrote The Tattooed Man, I believe, or what do you remember the name of that? It was the Super Tattooed Man or something like that, where it's just nothing but a series of stories all based on the tattoos on a particular individual. That he's not just a science fiction writer, he's not just a Twilight Zone type of writer. In fact, he's someone who really gets into the human condition, the human spirit. And my favorite book that he's ever written is Dandelion Wine. And the title of my speech is Dandelion Wine, based on the book, but I'm only going to read a chapter. My goal tonight is to be able to read out loud. So I'm not going to really be looking at my audience. I'm going to be reading this book and attempting to make it come alive for you. And as I read Ray Bradbury, he has always come alive for me. His characters speak to me. The way that he is written has affected the way I write my speeches, in terms of how I describe the events that are happening, in terms even of the themes, some of the victorious attitudes that he has, even as his characters go through various struggles. Dandelion Wine takes place back in the 30s, though it doesn't have today's cell phones and airplanes and fancy computers. It's very much an old-style story. And with that, I'm going to begin. Late that night, going home from the show with his mother and father and his brother Tom, Douglas saw the tennis shoes in the bright store window. He glanced quickly away, but his ankles were seized, his feet suspended, then rushed. The earth spun. The shop awnings slammed their canvas wings overhead with a thrust of his body running. His mother and father and brother walked quietly on both sides of him. Douglas walked backwards, watching the tennis shoes in the midnight window left behind. "It was a nice movie," said Mother. "It was," Douglas murmured. It was June and long past time for buying the special shoes that were quiet as a summer rain falling on the walks. June, and the earth full of raw power and everything everywhere in motion. The grass was still pouring in from the country, surrounding the sidewalks, stranding the houses. Any moment the town would capsize, go down, and leave not a stir in the clover and weeds. And here Douglas stood, trapped on the dead cement and the red brick streets, hardly able to move. "Dad, back there in that window, those cream sponge pair of Lightfoot shoes." "Oh yeah, suppose you tell me why you need a new pair of sneakers, Douglas. Can you do that?" "Well, It was because they felt the way it feels every summer when you take off your shoes for the first time and run in the grass. They felt like it feels sticking your feet out of the hot covers in wintertime to let the cold wind from the open window blow on them suddenly, and you let them stay out for a long time until you pull them back in under the covers again to feel them like packed snow. The tennis shoes felt like it always feels the first time every year wading in the slow waters of the creek and seeing your feet below half an inch further downstream with refraction than the real part of you above water. But Dad, it's hard to explain. Douglas tried to get it all into words. And his father, yeah, what's wrong with last year's sneakers? Why can't you dig them out of the closet? Well, Douglas felt sorry for boys who lived in California where they wore tennis shoes all year long and never knew what it was to get winter off your feet. Peel off the iron leather shoes all full of snow and rain and run barefoot for a day. Then lace on that new tennis shoes, those new tennis shoes of the season, which was better than barefoot. The magic was always in a new pair of shoes. It's 10 to 12.
Oh, damn.
The magic night might die by the 1st of September, but now in late June there was still plenty of magic. Shoes like these could jump you over trees and rivers and houses. If you wanted, you could jump over fences and sidewalks and dogs. Don't you see? I just can't use last year's pair. Last year's pair were dead inside. They had been fine when he started them out last year. By the end of summer, every year, you always found out, you always knew you couldn't really jump over rivers and trees and houses in them, and they were dead. But this was a new year, and he felt that this time, with this new pair of shoes, he could do anything, anything at all. Save your money. 5 or 6 weeks. Dad, summer will be over. Reasons. Got to think of reasons for the shoes. Well, as anyone knew, the hills around town were wild with friends putting cows to riot, playing barometer to the atmospheric changes, taking sun, peeling like calendars every day to take more sun. To catch those friends, you must run faster than foxes or squirrels. As for the town, it steamed with enemies grown irritable with heat. So remembering every winter argument and insult, find friends, ditch enemies. That was the cream sponge pair of Lightfoot motto. Does the world run too fast? Want to catch up? Want to be alert? Stay alert? Lightfoot then. Lightfoot. He held his coin bank up and heard the faint, small tinkling, the airy weight of the money there. Whatever you want, he thought, you've got to make your own way. During the night now, let's find that path through the forest. Old Mr. Sanderson moved through his shoe store as the proprietor of a pet shop must move through his shop where are kenneled animals from everywhere in the world, touching each one briefly along the way. Mr. Sanderson brushed his hands over the shoes in his window. Some of them were like cats to him, and some were like dogs. Touched each pair with concern, adjusting laces, fixing tongues. Then he stood in the exact center of the carpet and looked around, nodding. There was the growing sound of thunder. One moment, the door to Sanderson's shoe emporium was empty. The next, Douglas Spaulding stood clumsily there, staring down at his leather shoes as if these heavy things could not be pulled up out of the cement. The thunder had stopped when his shoes had stopped. Now, with painful slowness, daring to look only at the money in his cupped hand, Douglas moved out of the bright sunlight of Saturday afternoon. He made careful stacks of nickels, dimes, and quarters on the counter, like someone playing chess and worried if the next move carried him out into the sun or into deep shadow. Don't say a word. Douglas froze. First, I know just what you want to buy. Second, I see you every afternoon at my window. You don't think I see? You're wrong. Third, to give it its full name, you want the Royal Crown Cream Sponge pair of Lightfoot tennis shoes, like menthol on your feet. Fourth, you want credit. No, I've got something better than credit to offer. Before I tell you, Mr. Sanderson, you've got to do me one small favor. Can you remember when was the last time you yourself wore a pair of Lightfoot sneakers, sir? Oh, 10, 20, 30 years ago? Why? Oh, Mr. Sanderson, don't you think you owe it to your customers, sir, to at least try the tennis shoes you sell? Just for 1 minute? So you know how they feel? People forget if they don't keep testing things. United Cigar Store man smokes his cigars, doesn't he? Candy store man samples his own stuff, I should think. You may have noticed, I am wearing shoes. But not sneakers, sir. How are you going to sell sneakers unless you can rave about them? And how are you going to rave about them unless you know them? Well, Mr. Sanderson, you sell me something and I'll sell you something just as valuable. Is it absolutely necessary to the sale that I put on a pair of the sneakers, boy? Oh, I sure wish you could, sir. A minute later, seated panting quietly, he laced the tennis shoes to his long, narrow feet. They looked detached and alien down there next to the dark cuffs of his business suit. Mr. Sanderson stood up. How do they feel? How do they feel, he asks. They feel fine. He started to sit down. Please, Mr. Sanderson, now could you kind of rock back and forth a little? Sponge around, bounce kind of, while I tell you the rest. It's this. I give you my money. You give me the shoes. I owe you $1. But Mr. Sanderson, soon as I get those shoes on, you know what happens? What? Bang! I deliver your packages. Pick up packages, bring you coffee, burn your trash, run to the post office, telegraph office, library. You'll see 12 of me in and out every minute. Feel those shoes, Mr. Sanderson. Feel how fast they take me, all those springs inside. Feel all the running inside. Feel how they kind of grab hold and can't let you alone and don't like you just standing there. Feel how quick I'd be doing the things you'd rather not bother with. You stay in the nice, cool store. Well, I'm jumping all around town. But it's not me, really. It's the shoes. They're going like mad down alleys, cutting corners and back. There they go. Mr. Sanderson stood amazed with the rush of words. When the words got going, the flow carried him. He began to sink deep into the shoes, to flex his toes, limber his arches, test his ankles. He rocked softly, secretly, back and forth in a small breeze from the open door. The tennis shoes silently hushed themselves deep into the carpet, sank as in the jungle grass, in loam and resilient clay. He gave one solemn bounce of the heels in the yeasty dough and the yielding and welcoming earth. Emotions hurried over his face as if many colored lights had been switched on and off. His mouth hung slightly open. Slowly, he gently rocked himself to a halt, and the boy's voice faded, and they stood there looking at each other in a tremendous and natural silence. Boy, 5 years, how would you like a job selling shoes in this emporium? Gosh, thanks, Mr. Sanderson, but I don't know what I'm going to be yet. Anything you want to be, son, you'll be. No one will ever stop you. That's the way I want to speak.